Good evening to one and all. I am Anshula Mehta, Assistant Director at Impact and Policy Research Institute, IMPRI, New Delhi, and I welcome you all to episode 17 of our talk series, The State of Gender Equality, #Gender Gaps, organized by the Gender Impact Studies Center at Impact and Policy Research Institute, along with GenDev Center for Research and Innovation and Delhi Post. In this series, we engage with experts on gender issues who share their insights on the challenges and way forward in achieving gender equality based on their work, experience, and research through an intersectional lens. Today, we have a talk on mainstreaming single women in Atmanirbhar Bharat by Ms. Srimoy Piyukundu, best-selling author and leading columnist on gender and sexuality. The chair for today's session is Professor Govind Kelkar, chairperson of the Gender Impact Studies Center at IMPRI, and also executive director of GenDev Center for Research and Innovation, and an eminent professor. She might join us a little later as she is engaged in a medical appointment. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today, Ms. Srimoy Piyukundu. She is an acclaimed lifestyle journalist who has worked in leading publications like Times of India, India Today, Midday, and the Asian Age, and created editorial blueprints with breakthrough publications like Metro Now. After more than a decade in print media, she migrated to PR, where she helmed the media strategy division of Genesis Burson Marsteller and headed the entertainment and lifestyle vertical of Hanmer MSL. She debuted with Faraway Music, her critically lauded first novel, in 2013, followed by her best-selling feminist erotica, Sita's Curse, and her third work of fiction, You've Got the Wrong Girl. In 2017, she wrote her first non-fiction work, the widely appreciated and critically acclaimed Status Single, a narrative drawing from the lives of 3,000 urban Indian single women about the daily struggle of being single in a country where the highest validation for women remains marriage and motherhood. That was featured on Los Angeles Times and The Guardian London as a seminal work of female identity. Her latest work of fiction, Cut, takes a look at the stifling environment of government censorship and the struggle of a theatre activist to retain his artistic freedom. This was also performed as a play at Delhi's prestigious National School of Drama and was directed by legendary theatre director Abhilash Pillai. She is the founder of the community Status Single that aims to address 74.8 million single Indian women in this country and is all set to curate and host the SWIFT Summit, Single Women of India Forward Together, in Bangalore in 2021. She also curates and hosts a fortnightly online chat show, Status Single with Shri, that completed 10 episodes on social issues. She has just completed season 2 with the Women Who Inspire Me series with iconic single women achievers in an endeavor to mainstream the single women population in India. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us today for this presentation. And without further ado, I invite you to share your insights and experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I almost, feel, it's like a full circle moment because, just this morning, one of the members of my community, as you all know, I'm a founder of a community for single women, Status Single. And I'm starting at the middle of my story, but just this morning, one of the community members very proudly shared the cover of the New Yorker magazine, December 2020, which had such a powerful illustration of a single woman alone, like I am in my boudoir or her workstation or her work desk, surrounded by her cats, her books, her manuscripts, probably, and just that that picture which according to me was so empowering, that we are not looking down on single women as the spinster, the cat lady, the abala, the failure, the divorcee, the widow, all the various labels which box women and render us voiceless in this country. But we are presenting single women as, symbolic of self-reliance, hope, courage, and resilience, which is what I think my life and the lives of 74.1 million single women in this country stand for. So I'm going to, just read out some figures before I, get deeper into my talk. So the details of the population by marital status from the census 2011 were made available to the public in July 2015. And by all accounts, India right now boasts of the largest number of single women in its history. According to census data, there was a 39% increase in the number of single women, widows, never married, divorced, abandoned, from 51.2 million in 2001 to 71.4 million in 2011. The never married category in the census takes into account all women who are aged above the age of 18 and who are not married. So more realistic estimates actually puts the number of single women in India at way over 50 million. Along with this, I'm going to cite some important statistics. Single women, as I said, today constitute 8.6% of the female population in India. A country made up only of Indian single women would be the 24th most populous nation in the world. This would be ahead of South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Australia, and many, many more countries. Yet, singlehood in this country is still seen as a matter of shame, personal stigma, marginalization, and failure. And apart from, of course, harassment at work, being cheated out of ancestral property by married siblings, and the emotional, the physical, and the financial burden and thrust of caregiving put onto the shoulders of single women. Um, the numbers, I'm just coming back to the figures before I speak further. The numbers of widowed, separated, and divorced men, if we were to make a comparison, are considerably less than those of women in similar situations. And we've seen that, there has been a percentage growth in the female population at 18.3, while the number of single women is 29.6. Over the last 10 years, there are a larger number of younger widows and also a larger number of never married women who claim to be single by choice over the age of 35, pointing towards both demographic as well as societal changes adding to the growth in the numbers of single women. The number of never married women also, I mean, this is, I think, historic. It's seen an unprecedented increase of almost 66%. Mostly, of course, these are urban professional women who sometimes, even after one divorce, just don't want to get remarried again. Also, the figures, that I just quoted seem to suggest that there's an increase in the number of women who are choosing to stay married, either that or the age of women, the marriageable age of women. Now women want to pursue their professional careers, their personal ambitions, rather than settle down by the biologically determined age. We grew up hearing 30 ki ho gayi hai, like it was some kind of a cardinal sin to be 30 and unmarried and not a mother. Also, something which is very, very interesting is the fact that today households which are headed by single earning single mothers have grown by 34.5%. And given the ever increasing migration of young women and men to cities, it seems that this number is going to grow. This again, of course, is a worrying trend because policy, unfortunately, in this country continues to cater towards male headed households. It's almost like we're in denial that there are single mothers and single breadwinners who are actually running their families. In 2001, again, data about separated and divorced women was not disaggregated. And of course, we saw that in 2009, the National Forum intervened and demanded that separated women be enumerated separately. The government has agreed. Again, the data regarding separated women does not reflect the reality because honestly speaking, I feel that the number of separated women today is much, much more than what the last census figures actually reveal. And that's because that, there is so much of social stigma still around, women actually coming out, their families actually coming out and admitting that the marriage has broken down to the data collector. As in 2001, in 2011 as well, the data continues to show the existence of married females under the age of 18 years. So, of course, we still have, women who are being forced probably into marriage at very, very young ages, who are even becoming mothers by the age of 14 and 15. The lockdown, we've all been reeling under the COVID induced lockdown. And data once again shows that over 7 crore single women are also battling the lockdown on their own. Here I'm going to just read out or cross reference a recent report conducted by the UN Women, which revealed cases of women in various kinds of homes which showed that approximately 13 million single mothers were running their homes, making it around an estimated 4.5% of all Indian households in the country. This report, titled Progress of the World's Women 2019-20, Families in a Changing World, examines how the transformations in families impact women's rights and reveal that most countries can afford family-friendly policies. It found that globally, a very, very large majority of lone parent families, which almost sort of lead up to 8% of all households, are led by women. And these are women who are juggling paid work, they're managing child rearing, they're contributing to unpaid domestic work, as well as sometimes, bearing the cross of aging and ailing parents. And since the organization covered 89 countries in the report, the number of households led by single mothers goes up to 101.3 billion. Around the world, we are witnessing concerted efforts to deny women's agency and their right to make their own decisions in the name of protecting quote unquote family values. Yet we know through research, we know through data collection, census figures in different countries, that there is no more any standard formula of family, nor has there ever been. These were words by the UN Women Executive Director. And this report counters that pushback by showing that families in all their diversity are critical drivers of gender equality, provided that decision makers deliver policies which are rooted at the reality of how people live today and have women's rights at their core. This journey of mine, which I think has in a way, defined who I am, my purpose. Sometimes I just meet people now who say, "Oh, hashtag status single." They sort of, though I've written so many books, but they kind of just remember me largely because of this one. Started with my own personal odyssey of being single. I'm, because of, we have a time restraint, I will talk about three separate incidents in my life. One was when I was on a holiday to Sri Lanka with my parents in the year 2016. And I was harassed extremely obtrusively by the immigration officer. In fact, my book, Status Single, which as Anshula said, it is considered a seminal work of female identity, opened with that. The immigration officer was extremely invasive, like I said, constantly probing, whether he saw the fact that I was a Miss Srimoy Piukundu, and he kept asking me what I do for fun. And if my idea of a perfect vacation is a family holiday, even, sneakily whispering some places in Sri Lanka, beaches where he said single women can enjoy themselves. My friend at that point of time was attached to the embassy of Sri Lanka. And I did take this up very, very strongly by post on social media, which went viral, and also her intervention. And I said, this is the last thing that a woman wants to face on a holiday. And here I am traveling with my, aging parents. I shudder to think what single women in this country have to go through, women who are actually traveling alone. Another incident which stays with me is a friend of mine who was a journalist, and he had married a Muslim journalist. And they were staying in my house, and my mother was trying to find them accommodation in Chittaranjan Park, which, as most of you who are having roots or having a life in Delhi will know, is considered to be a Bengali ghetto. Um, I remember this incident so vividly. You know, it was an afternoon, and my mother had taken my friend and his newly married wife and myself to see a couple of houses which our broker had recommended. And this Bengali lady, very matronly in her nightie, came out, and she was probably taking her afternoon siesta like all Bengalis do. And she rubbed her eyes and she opened the door and she asked us our names. So my mother introduced herself first, and then very proudly said, "This is my friend's a daughter's friend. He's a very well-known journalist. He's a young editor. This is his wife. She's with the Times of India. My parents were always very proud of my journalistic career, never stopped me." And suddenly that lady said, "Ek minute, Daran," which means wait a minute. "What did you say the name of the girl is?" And my mother said her name, which was a Muslim name. And she then looked at the broker, who was obviously a Bengali and was naturally known to her, and said to him that, "Haven't I told you never to bring Muslims and single women into this house?" And I had faced the same kind of harsh discrimination when I uh, moved to Bombay, to join the Bombay Times, which is one of the leading lifestyle publications of the city as entertainment and lifestyle editor. In the year 2000, I was there from about 2003 to 2006. And despite the fact that the apartment was being taken on a company lease, everywhere I went, I had to wear this badge of being a bachelor girl. And the brokers would always tell me to wear, I used to wear back in those days a ring, a diamond ring, which is my birthstone. Always used to tell me to swap the ring onto my left, the ring finger, as a symbol that I was married. Everywhere I went, the brokers would reassure the landlord or the landlady that my parents were going to visit me very often, and that I was a girl with family values. So once I remember, on our way back from Mahim to VT, where the office of Bombay Times was, I asked him that, "What do you mean, a girl with family values? Exactly what does that mean? Like this sanskari Bharatiya Nari, what is your definition of it?" And he said, "Ma'am, the problem is that you are associated with a paper like Bombay Times. Never mind that I was 24 and one of its youngest lifestyle editors, but that achievement was naturally not important or critical in finding a house in Bombay, known to be such a cosmopolitan city, filled with, in fact, single professionally qualified working women." And he said that, the impression of people who work in Bombay Times is that you people party a lot, you smoke, you drink. आपका तो page 3 के साथ उठना बैठना है, and therefore you're going to be promiscuous, and you're going to bring men into the house and have wild parties. And the society has a lot of rules. There's a wonderful documentary on Netflix called Bachelor Girls, which I urge anyone listening to watch, which is made by a dear friend of mine, Shikha Makan, who was a young documentary filmmaker who had faced this herself. And she was fighting and is still fighting a protracted court battle with her housing society on the same thing. This humiliation of a woman at the hands of this very male, very entitled, very middle-aged, like we are the moral guardian of women of this society kind of housing society, which is pretty common in Bombay. So that incident stayed with me. The way that auntie in CR Park, a very Bengali, with her shakha pola, very matronly, the way she almost treated us like pariahs and said, "Haven't I told you, no single may are Muslim anbena, don't bring Muslims and single women." That really stayed with me. Then again, in 2016, I was personally going through a very, very gray, dark time just before my autoimmune disorder was officially diagnosed. I was in and out of hospitals. I had a respiratory problem. I had nerve pain. It was completely like a mystery ailment. And I felt sick in Bangalore. I had a respiratory distress one night, and I taxied myself to a hospital called the Vikram Hospital in Bangalore, and then called up my friends saying, whoever I knew, one or two people saying, can you please come, because I'm really sick and I can't breathe, and I think I may have cried because I was in a lot of discomfort. And I was admitted. And actually the title of my book, Status Single, comes from that hospital form which I was made to fill. And even as I was going blue and I was literally gasping for breath, all the administrative guy wanted to know was, why am I alone in a city like Bangalore? And who's come with me? Aapke saath kaun hai? Aapke saath kaun hai? You know, this question haunted me from the time I, got off the cab, sat on the wheelchair, was wheeled into the emergency. A doctor finally, came to see me, examine me. My oxygen levels were very low. So he said, we'll have to give you an IV. Then I was taken to a room. All of that, the fact that I was all alone before my cousin and her husband arrived, seemed to be such an anomaly. So I'm going to, just because this whole movement is actually so related to my book, I'm going to read out a very, very short paragraph from my book, Status Single, um, which is about this incident. Picture this scene. I am standing butt naked in a large hospital room miles away from my home in Delhi. My face is bluish green because of 3 consecutive respiratory attacks in a span of 3 days. I was wheeled into emergency by a bunch of strangers. My hands are swollen with unwieldy blood clots from continuous IV drips and steroid injections. This is the third time this is happening to me in the last 6 months, the third hospital. My eyes are puffy from lack of sleep. I'm tensed. Tomorrow is the last day of my teaching assignment. If I don't go tomorrow, I won't be paid for the entire month, is what I think. My breathing is intermittent. The doctors, again, don't have a clue what caused this or what is the next test I should be prescribed. All I get is vague answers on my diagnosis. Sponging me the next morning, as I'm still groggy from lack of sleep, are 2 women. A frumpy ayah in her mid 50s who has a veritable mustache, and a nurse, a 20 something Malayali in a pale olive green uniform, who chatters on relentlessly on how she can't wait to join her spouse in Saudi Arabia. I listen in, my limbs aching every time I'm pushed and prodded, as I ponder on the unfortunate fate of many women from her native state of Kerala who are married off to men they hardly ever see, except on holidays if they are lucky. The Aya, on the other hand, is a native Kannadiga. Her husband is a drunkard who occasionally lives with a younger woman. The Aya is childless. She and her husband have tried. She has failed, according to him. It's her fault. She curses the other woman, rolling her eyes, her lips quivering with an impotent rage. And yet, as these 2 women wipe my privates using a warm sponge, the room reeking of the nauseating smell of antiseptic, they constantly express a singular disbelief at how I am still single at 38, going on to suggest I consult a good astrologer at the earliest. Alarmed at how a critical time like this, a crisis, I land up all by myself in a hospital in the middle of the night, muttering how I require a husband and that it's unfair to have my graying father fly down from Delhi to firefight a looming health crisis, another looming health crisis. As I slip into a pink striped gown, I watch the 2 women converse in a tongue not mine, till the ayah blurts out bluntly in broken Hindi. You don't look your age, ma, but a woman's body is known to lie. Don't delay things further. Having a child will inevitably get tough soon, and then no man will ever touch you. What can you possibly give him then? No child. Like in her case, will my man also desert me within days of our marriage? Is this the unspoken fear in the minds of women who are forced by their families to settle down? This is the question on my tongue too. I wonder if that is the real fear and anxiety that haunts millions of childless women or those trapped in abusive mute marriages, afraid of not being able to procreate timely, failing the highest duty of a wife and the ultimate benchmark of the average Indian family, producing a bunch of noisy children. Images of cheerful families shown on television commercials drift past my fatigued mind. Aging grandparents, picnic baskets, matching t shirts, and Bangkok holidays. Thoughts form and melt. I check my phone to see if my father has checked in at the airport and if he has texted confirming that his flight is on time. It's winter. Delhi is foggy and miserable. Logging onto Facebook, I read the status I had shared way past midnight, confessing that this was my greatest nightmare alive, and how, for the first time in my life, my aloneness had stared me in my face, literally knocking me over. The way my heart skipped when I filled out the following status: single. The same hollowness returning as I now scan through the virtual concern pouring out on my timeline, providing, in a sense, a passive sort of reassurance, except one of the comments that said, "Sucks being single, right? Or your poor dad." My room is eerily empty. After Status Single was published in May 2018, and after we traveled to 10 Indian cities with this book, which was the recorded testimonials of over 3,500 women, what I also realized is that there is no one type of a single woman. A single woman is not just Shrimoy, who's never been married and turned 40, who's the only child and has to manage her own finances, pay up her LICs on time, fret about not getting work to keep her afloat, and take care of her parents and a small child as we foster a little girl, my sister, who's now 11. I realized that single was also my widowed mother once. My father died by suicide, and my mother, a young widow at 29, was forced to move back in with her parents because her school teacher's salary would not afford a roof over our heads. Single was also my divorced cousin sisters, who had decided to then remain single by choice and who had faced a lot of familial, curiosity, taunts, and even blame games, that maybe they were too ambitious. Maybe, they were, one of them had chosen to be childless by choice. So that was blamed or attributed for the breakdown of her marriage. Single was also a young woman who I met in Pune and interviewed for my book, who now happens to be one of India's best known differently abled stand up comics, Shweta Mantri, a woman on a wheelchair who, very much like the heroine of Margarita with a Straw, Kalki. And as you know, Margarita with a Straw is based on the life of disability rights activist Malini Chib, who happens to be a cousin of the director Shonali Bose, who's also single, by the way. Um, it's also a woman with disability. Single is also, the whole gamut of LGBTQI. It is bisexual women, it is the trans women. And here I go back to an interview that I conducted on Gauri Sawant, who today happens to be very, very well known thanks to a Vicks commercial, which really brought her into our homes and I think hearts, which actually showed the beautiful relationship that she shares with her adopted daughter Gayatri, a child that she rescued from Kamathipura, which is one of Bombay's largest red light areas, where Gauri works to prevent AIDS and does a lot of work in distributing condoms, spreading sex awareness, and generally talking to trans women who work as sex workers. When I interviewed Gauri, she was extremely perturbed about the fact that while the Ministry of Child and Women's welfare had made adoption for single women easier, I won't say completely fuss free, but definitely easier. And there were icons like Sushmita Sen and a lot of Bollywood actresses who were now adopting or even talking about procedures like surrogacy. Trans women like Gauri, who were single, still could not adopt. This was before, of course, the Supreme Court declared that, that the third sex is permissible, right? We could have that on our passports and legal documents. Also, I think I realized that, I mean, you guys probably would know this, that, in 2016, the Ministry of Women and Child Development also recognized single women as independent entities in its first ever draft national policy for women. And they talked about creating, and I quote, a comprehensive social protection mechanism for them. But unfortunately, and like many important legislations which are just stuck, nothing has really moved further on this. And it's almost like I say that whenever I'm talking about single women, be it in creating my community or trying to get sponsors for my summit, I feel that we are almost in denial. And while we have iconic single women, I mean, three chief ministers, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, have boasted of powerful single women politicians. We've had J. Jayalalitha, who was called Amma, who's a 6-time chief minister of Tamil Nadu, to Behen Mayawati, who's been a 4-time chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, to, of course, our Didi Mamta Banerjee, who's serving as chief minister of West Bengal since 2011. We have actresses today who are single by choice. They're brave and resilient about their choices. Yet the on ground reality of single women continues to be hauntingly different. Even in my community, older single women struggle with assisted community living. The greatest fear of women seems to be, who is going to look after me when I grow old? A fear which often compels women to either stay in dysfunctional and emotionally, absolutely sort of hollow marriages where there's abuse, there's physical torture, there's marital rape, there's no child support, there's disrespect, or even, force women to accept carefully orchestrated arranged marriages with men who they have nothing in common with, and go through series of humiliations even in the process leading up to that marriage. I mean, I remember a time I met this, Ivy League corporate honcho who was a big shot with SAP Technologies, and we met at Oberoi, which I think he was trying to make an impression, so he insisted that it had to be a 5-star. I wanted to meet at the coffee house on MG Road and just have my filter coffee at 5 p.m. But he insisted it had to be the very plush Oberoi outside. We sat in the garden. And I remember the first question that he asked me, I haven't forgotten this, was whether I'm a virgin. His mother later told my mother, when my mother said that, sorry, we can't take forward this alliance, that it was because I was a journalist. It was because I was a lifestyle editor. I've had men tell me that I apply too much of makeup, and they're scared that if they were to marry me, the pala kharcha will be very high. Someone told me that I'm too glamorous. I look too glamorous. I'm not domesticated enough in my appearance. So the humiliation that women go through. During the lockdown, as a community, we faced a lot of older single women. Somehow we don't even consider the fact that most of our mothers, like most of the sisters of my mother, are today single once again because they are widows or they have never got married. We have aunts like this in the family. And today they have nowhere to go. So during the lockdown, one of the concerns in the community was, where do these older single women whose children do not live with them go? Because they are largely dependent on the kindness and compassion of neighbors and of house help, who might be trusted and charging them a fat fee, but that money is being sent by the children to look after them. And you might be surprised to know that today, according, again, I'm going back to the census data, 1.5 single women, 1.5 lakh single women have never been married in the age group of 60 to 65. And this number will only increase because in the next 5 years, the elderly population of India is expected to reach 143 million. The well-heeled single woman is also now one of the greatest investors of property. And we have, very, very sophisticated retirement communities coming up all across the country. And I'm going to quote this Amakosh in Kasoli, which is an assisted community living retirement, haven, like they call it. 10% of all bookings have been done by single women. And Sanjay Lakhotia, I had spoken to him. He's one of the co-founders. He says this is a striking new development. Single older women, whether unmarried, divorced, or widowed, have an immediate need for independent living options. And in comparison, couples often book and they move in much later. Sometimes it's booked by their children, but they never really move in. So this demographic is becoming important to us even as real estate builders and observers of the market. A studio apartment at Amakosh Kasoli costs rupees 45 lakhs, and a 2 BHK there costs rupees 98 lakhs. Helicopters take you to Delhi, attached to most of the best hospitals in the city of Delhi. Um, I think my aim in building up this community or speaking about it as much as I do and as much as I want to is because I want to mainstream this community. I want policy to change. I want our health to be prioritized. I want the government to look at us like not a weak marginalized community, but a marginalized community. I want women to have access to healthcare. I know, as a woman who's battled of course, an autoimmune disorder, but more than that, gynecological illnesses like PCOD, like endometriosis, that every time I have reached out to a healthcare professional, I have only been met with judgment and scorn. Women I've interviewed in the book have openly spoken about how doctors, women gynecologists in top healthcare facilities across the country have been very, very judgmental, often refusing to perform an abortion, which is legalized in India. Also, more and more, I see women whose marriages are breaking down, wanting to come back to work. And here I'm going to talk about the hypocrisy of the corporate world, which, tom-toms diversity and inclusion, but is horribly ageist. I've had women in the community tell me that, we want to put a PIL, saying that, companies like Amazon, when they're advertising for marketing staff or for social media experts or even software engineers, are only stating the professional qualifications that are required. But when we are actually appearing for those interviews armed with all our degrees, with all our professional experiences, what we find is that, they are, oh, you're okay, you're not married, oh, you're going to be touching 50. It's almost like there's this wall. When I've gone literally door to door in Bangalore to big corporations like Titan, for example, which, it's one of its companies like Raga, their entire advertising and marketing campaign is around single women. If you remember that ad with Nimrat Kaur sitting at the airport and she bumps into her ex, and he slightly sort of makes a jibe that, oh, you're still single, and she says, yes, I will be till I find the right person. Or the beautiful ad of a young widow being led to the altar by her daughter, and she's, getting married for the second time, which I always feel is so reflective of my mother's journey. uh, Even that organization, I have been asked questions like, will the Swift Summit be anti men? Will it tell women that marriage is a bad thing? Will it influence women wrongly? I almost felt like, when we were growing up, and there was this one aunt of mine who had fallen in love out, with a Muslim man outside her marriage, and she'd left her marriage, which was clearly dead by the time she fell in love, and how she was always looked upon as the bad aunt in our family. So whenever she would come to visit, my grandparents would, and I was, I loved her because she used a lot of makeup. She was a warm, gregarious person, was a great singer, great cook. And my grandfather would tell me later when she left, oh, be careful, you're turning out to be just like her. So I felt like that when I've gone for these pitches where people are, they're stunned by the figures. Woo, 74.1 million, dude, that's a huge demographic. I mean, this is like a cash cow that companies are sitting on, because these are women who have buying power. These are women buying houses, cars. They are self employed, they are starting their own entrepreneurial ventures. But hold on, is your summit going to be telling women that that is a better life, that they could be happier that way, that children do not need a father or a paternal side of the family to be normal, healthy, functional adults? I felt that prejudice. It's very, very strong, even in so-called woke corporate India. Just the other day, there was a great report in Economic Times which said banks, right, which are today having actresses like Deepika before her marriage, talk about, buying everything, earning their own keep, spending as much as you want. Women are not able to get loans. Women who are even giving up all their gold to start a small business are being advised by bank managers, sometimes women, saying that, oh my God, who's the guarantor? And if the guarantor is an aging parent, it's out. You have no chance of ever getting that loan. And this again is in an industry which is talking about women becoming financially savvy, which is talking about women becoming house owners, which is talking about women, saving, women, running their households. So I find that, I think I definitely feel we are on the brink of a social revolution. I feel it is as much a cultural revolution as a social, societal, familial, financial revolution. But the struggle here is we are clashing with our culture, because this is a culture which has told us that the Devi is the married woman. It's the Sitahood that is celebrated and venerated. Today I read a very, very interesting article which said that, and it's ironical, that ancient India seemed to be quite comfortable with the idea of a single mother, a single childless woman, or a single mother. Gargi, scholar and daughter of sage Vachanku, was a single woman who refused to be curtailed by marriage. Shakuntala was probably mythology's first single mother. In the original text, as you know, she was abandoned by King Dushyant, her lover, and she was scornful of the royal legacy of a lover husband. She tells him that she has brought up their son Bharat as a prince of the forest, as a child of nature. Then there is Hidimba, who brings up Ghatotkacha alone in the forest without the father Bhima. Also, Jabal, the mother of famous philosopher Rishi Satyakama Jabali, who lends her name to her son. When a young Jabali goes to Rishi Gautam for his higher education and is asked about his father, he gives the answer supplied to him by his mother. And he says, I do not, the mother says to him, I do not know who your father is. I gave birth to you. You were born from my womb. I am your mother. You are Jabali, the son of Jabal. That is your identity. That is all that matters. My dream is someday, like the New Yorker, we will acknowledge single women as a resilient, courageous, dynamic, diverse, and extremely, large uh, demographic group of women. We won't be seen as failures. We will be seen as, women who have achieved a lot on their own. And right now, like I was telling Dr. Kumar, and I meant that, actually, again, ironically, the Prime Minister is talking about hashtag Atmanirbhar Bharat. Which category of women more than us really stands for that? Self-reliance, determination, coming out of adverse circumstances and just trying to lead a life which is fraught with difficulty, loneliness, very, very fragile mental health, because we're so pressurized, we have no one to turn to. like laws may be getting progressive, but on ground implementation is tough. There's still a lot of social stigma and prejudice, and yet here we are. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, ma'am, for such an in-depth and such a thought-provoking talk on that. And it was really also very powerful that you drew from your own experiences and your work in part, along with also sharing some really important data. So thank you so much for that. You've really brought up so many important aspects of this discussion. Uh, so it was thoroughly engrossing, but it also leaves us with much to think about, in that how the discussion around single women is reduced to a very frivolous thing, but it cannot be that, and it needs to be taken in all seriousness, with the aspects of health and financial empowerment, and how policy really needs to take shape with these considerations. So thank you. And with that in mind, and to keep the discussion going, I would like to go to our Ms. Chattopadhyay. Sohini Chattopadhyay is an award-winning independent journalist based in Kolkata who writes on politics, public health, and the arts. In 2017, she won the Bala Kailasam citation for reporting on the web, and many awards and recognition for her journalism.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Thank you, Srimoy, for your excellent talk. I'm still thinking about it. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, please go on.
Yes. I wanted to actually bring up two things. That one of the things is something that Srimoy and I have actually discussed because it's something that friends of hers, friends we have in common, doctors mentioned, which is that these are doctors who treat, one of them is a breast specialist, and she leads the Breast Institute at a leading hospital in Calcutta. And she had said, and another doctor friend of ours had actually also agreed that this was her experience as well, that when they see men going through cancer, they often see that their partners are a very, very solid part of the entire journey, the odyssey of treatment. But when it is the other way around, that when it's women who are who've been diagnosed with cancer or with a very serious chronic problem, then in the course of the treatment, they often see that there's a point at which the male partner stops showing up. And some of their patients have confided in them enough to say that, okay, so the relationship or the marriage is breaking up. And actually, this is a good point to ask you at IMPRI, that I had actually thought about doing a story about this because it's so potent, right? That if you have women who are partnered, who are married, and then they're made, many of them, the majority of them, when you compare that experience of a life-threatening disease, a life-threatening, possibly terminal disease, treatment for that, when they go through that in comparison to men who continue to be supported by their female partners, the women are finding themselves abandoned, really. How do we do a story about this? And the question that I faltered on was, how do we get data on this? There's a one way of doing the story is anecdotal. And we had these friends of ours in common, two very, very respected professionals in Calcutta. And I'm sure there would be other cases, but how do you make this into, stop this from being anecdata, as I call it, five anecdotes, and then, you say this happens. And a lot of features reporting in India is like that. Sadly, English language feature reporting is that, which is why it's probably not taken seriously. But how do you make this into data? How do you get um, statistics, figures on this? Because I don't know if anybody is even collecting, maybe these two professionals who are really good at their work and also deeply moved by this phenomenon they had observed, maybe they might be actually taking notes. But how do you construct this? So I invite um, the academics at IMPRI who may be listening to my question to suggest how do we find a way to do this. And the second thing I wanted to say is that it's also to do with um, medical things, actually, because that's one of the things I write on is health and medicine. So one of the stories that I spent a lot of time doing and I found a lot of acclaim for is a story about how women in India are the majority of living organ donors by far. And I used the Right to Information RTI to access data from government hospitals, and I used my own contacts through several years of reporting on health from to ask private hospitals to share data as well. So I got 10 years worth of data from 5 cities and 10 hospitals, a mix of government, private, and mission hospitals. And so the data is very stark that the majority of living organ donors in India I think what I found was 75% of living kidney donations come from women, and 61% of living liver donations come from women. And the other side of the story, how many women are organ recipients in transplants? So those figures were, I think, absolutely depressing. 19% of living kidney transplant recipients are women, and I think 24 or 28% of living liver recipients were women. I don't know if this sounds like too much information. I don't know how much people are aware of organ transplants. So I'll just very quickly say that there are two ways of getting a transplant. One is to have a deceased organ donor. That's the sort of thing that you see most often in popular culture, in films, or say in advertising, that you donate your organs after death, and somebody who needs it gets access to the organ. But by far in India, like maybe there's no actual data on this except certain states like Tamil Nadu, and even in Tamil Nadu, by far, organ transplants in India are based on living organ donation. So it's possible. Medical science has advanced, and you have what you call immunosuppressants. So it's very possible to give away one kidney and donate it to somebody who is having a chronic kidney problem. And it's also possible to donate up to 70% of your liver as a living donor, and the liver is an organ that regenerates. So women are by far, the numbers are staggering in terms of the donations, living organ donations that they make. And the recipient numbers are even more staggering. And as far as kidney disorders are concerned, there's actually data which shows that women are more likely to have kidney problems. It's not that men are more likely to have kidney problems. With liver, I think it's slightly more possible that men are more at risk, because one of the most common reasons for having a liver transplant is having, making bad lifestyle choices, and that doesn't always mean alcohol or alcohol-related disorders, but it could also mean, bad eating, which is something that men who are out and about and, eating off the road, street food, are much more likely to do. Now, this long preamble to say that, this is one of the stories that I did, But I continue to be interested in the story, and I continue to research it. And very recently, one of the doctors who helped me a lot getting access to data and interpreting it told me that she started observing that she's a senior liver specialist, and so many of her patients have liver transplants. So she's started observing that families now often mention, sometimes mention, okay, let's not say often mention, that I have a niece, she's not even married, so why can't she give her liver? Or somebody may say that, okay, I have a younger sister, she's not even married. So this demographic that Shimoy was talking about, single, of course it can vary across age, but if you're not married, or if you are not married at the time, so you could be a widow, or you could be a previously married person who is now separated or divorced, you're seen as somebody at least who can give your organs. Now, again, I've hit the roadblock of, how do I get data on this? The data that I used for my story on organ transplants and gender was fairly basic. I just applied for I made right to information requests to government hospitals and said, tell me the number of organ donors who are female in kidney and in liver separately across a 10-year period. So that's fairly basic question, but this is a lot more sophisticated. What is the sort of person from whom families expect an organ donation? So I just thought that these are two observations that I thought I should share. And I also invite you to tell me, how can we make stories like this more meaningful with data? How do we collect this?
I'd like to bring up something briefly that I was just keeping an eye on the time. Shohini also writes on Bollywood, so she may have a point of view, or some of you listening may want to have a word. I find the portrayal of single women in popular culture also to be extremely stereotypical and skewed. And I think that's one of the reasons, at least I have found it very difficult. When I go and talk to, say, corporations or institutes like yours for partnership opportunities, I find, like the image of the single woman has been painted by what Bollywood is showing us, which is unfortunate, because here are two real life flesh and blood single women, and I have so many women in my community, and of course, over 3,500 women who I interviewed for the book. But the lens through which we look at a single woman's life is, she's promiscuous, she has no responsibility, she's drinking, she's sleeping around, she's the upper or the rich woman of South Bombay, like the women in Four More Shots. And, I actually found this quote by Rangita Pritish Nandi, who is the producer of Four More Shots, Please, which was incidentally even nominated for an Emmy, I understand, this year. It thankfully didn't win because I thought it was a very badly made, show. But Rangita says, Amazon was on the same page in recognizing that single people and single women in particular, for whom it was a conscious decision to stay single, were a reality in Mumbai and India. Now look at that. Reality in Mumbai in India. So our image of the single woman is metro. She's from the metro. It helped that Aparna Purohit is the lady who heads content for Amazon, and who was part of the green lighting team, was single, as were Ishita, my sister, and I. Three women in a room of 5 people. That decision was made 2 slides into our pitch deck. But what have you shown on that show is my question. It's according to me a cheap ripoff of Sex and the City. And why are we still so bloody fixated on, an 80s book and an 80s show, Sex and the City, which I used to love at some point, mainly for Carrie's fashion. But today I just can't relate to it. And I think women in America also have now moved way past, that trajectory and that narrative. So somewhere I think, for researchers who, like, say, Shohini, have an interest or their domain of work is popular culture, it would be very interesting to see who is the single woman in our cinema. Either she is the widowed, suffering single mother who's carrying that, the langol, as we call it, the mother India who sweats and toils for her children and, is preyed upon by the rich zamindar. So she's still a fodder for male lust. Or she is the South Bombay, richy rich, sleeping with married men, smoking, going on sex holidays, in Rohit Bal and, that kind of, bikinis on beaches, bronzed bodies. But apart from this, is there uh, another lens of looking at single women, which I think is the reality of single women and the truth about single women in India?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sohini Chattopadhyay, and again, Srimoy Kundu ma'am, for bringing up some pertinent points around the theme of single women. Ms. Chattopadhyay, you talked about data, which of course is it's an issue that baffles in all fields, and I would like to say that we do conduct surveys where we ask questions around the marital status and try to gather data on single women. But then the issue of sample size often comes, and then how reliable are the insights we can draw from that data. So that is one thing, perhaps more light can like the other discussants can shine more light on that later. And Srimoy Kundu ma'am, again, right, about how single women are portrayed in media, and it often corrupts the discussions we have on single women, because those false narratives portrayed then often become the basis for how a lot of the public perceives single women, right? So that's another very pertinent thing that you've brought up that we need to think about. So moving on with the discussion, next I would like to call Dr. Simi Mehta. She is the CEO and editorial director of IMPRI. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Anshula. Thank you so much. I was just fascinated by Srimoy ma'am's lecture. What a passionate talk, and supported by Ms. Sohini. Thank you so much to both our respected panelists for today. And I just wanted both of you to continue. And it was, sometimes I had chills and sometimes I was like, okay, yes, this is the harsh reality. So thank you again. I'll just raise a few points and leave you with open questions if you could throw some light on. So yes, single women are often seen from the lens of vulnerability. On the one hand, we are denying women the agency, and on the other hand, we call them as bechari, as abla, and abla nari, etc. I am provoked to think out aloud about, do we treat the single men in the same manner? Certainly, we do not deny them the agency like we do to the single women, because in fact, we are testimonies to very powerful single men in the country, from chief ministers to the prime minister. This certainly points towards the systemic patriarchy that is deeply embedded in our society. And as Anshula also mentioned about the media and media portrayals, TV advertisements, social media, etc., wherein women are actually shown to be applying makeups or to be wearing good clothes, etc., fancy clothes, to be more liked or likable by their boyfriends, partners, husbands, etc. So another thing that Sri Mohi ma'am pointed out was the humiliation, the personal humiliation she had faced while being sort of denied of marriage alliance. So what I think personally is such kind of rejections actually come out of the covert insecurities and scare that the men have inside of them, that they are less competent and they are less progressive vis-a-vis the independent, financially sound and very empowered women. So they feel that they will not be able to keep pace with such partners, and therefore because of that inherent masculinity, they go ahead and then they say that I do not want to marry this person. So another thing about the healthcare, I actually had a friend who was pregnant and pregnant with a second child. She went to the gynecologist and she said, the other woman said that this is my third child, and I've come here all alone because my in-laws have said that okay, now you know everything, so you can go and get yourself treated. I mean, this is how even if you are in a marriage alliance, you are left to look after yourself, even if you are almost fulfilling the demands of maybe having a male child. So and another thing about widowhood. Widowhood is often considered in India as a state of social death, even among the higher castes in our country. So again, I am forced to think about why this should change. For a widower, this is not so. This is not a social death. And if the husband dies, because of bad habits, say for example, excessive drinking, out of a liver failure, or out of excessive smoking because of lung cancer, then why should the implications fall upon the woman or make her more vulnerable, the wife that the man leaves behind? And yeah, so these were my thoughts. And my question to ma'am is, Kundu ma'am, is that have you checked about or made a comparative analysis about the status of single women in developed countries? Uh, if yes, what are the policy lessons, what are the lessons, both policy and otherwise, which we can draw as we move forward in making an independent, good society, so to say, and to bring forward or foster a social and cultural revolution that actually acknowledges the women who are courageous, acknowledges women as courageous individuals, not as individuals who are married off, or daughters, or anybody of, without any strings attached. So your views on that?
So,
Thank you so much again. Thank you.
thank you. So, I'll tell you, one of the things that I want implemented in India, it's a dream, is a healthcare policy for single women. In Australia, my best friend's sister who lives in Sydney is a single mother. She's been divorced thrice, not once or twice, but thrice. And she was detected with breast cancer at the time her third marriage was falling apart. Um, Everything, her entire treatment, the education of her youngest child is borne by the state because she was abandoned by her husband. And she was also a victim of domestic abuse. Um, I want the same in India. In America, for instance, the same kind of healthcare benefits are afforded to single women. That, if you're a single mother, then the state gives you, if you're below a certain income level, the state gives you something called dole, which is, like a state sanctioned amount of money. Even in insurance policies, there are certain how do I say, licenses or certain benefits which are given to single women, especially if you're a single mother, or you're a breast cancer, ovarian cancer survivor, or you are a woman with disability. Here we do, I mean, I just feel that there is so much of, see, that's what I'm saying, that, the whole single women's revolution it attacks patriarchy where it hurts the most, which is that a woman is not a mother and she's not a wife. You know, the ultimate subjugation of women into this patriarchy led role, that a woman has to fulfill this prophecy of a birth almost, that she has to get married and she has to have a child, and then she has to fall into place. What is my place? You know, usko line mein lao. You know, it's an assembly line, right? You're born, your parents educate you, your bitiya is a paraya dhan, then the marriage happens, she throws the mountful scoopful of rice behind her shoulders, so she repays her parental debt, and then she's gone. And if the husband dies and if she's a widow, then she has to be this asexual creature, uska sar mundwa do, you know, send her to Varanasi or Kashi, where she's again going to be sexually assaulted, and she's going to be, you know, wedded to the Lord almost. So I think the single women's revolution talks about agency, it talks about sexual autonomy, it talks about financial liberation, and it does take on patriarchy, which is why I think we are so scared of it. The government is scared of it. You know, while we are making policies like, okay, a child does not need the signature of two parents today on a passport, but when we went to the passport office to get a passport for my sister, because we decided as a family that we would never travel abroad without her, she's so much a part of us, we realized that the rule for an abandoned woman is that she has to produce an FIR that the husband has left her. Now, firstly, tell me, my sister's mother is our house help. She's an illiterate maid. I hate using that word, but I am for effect. Or any woman who has been abandoned. I have abandoned women in my community who, for 5 years, were just trying to find out, oh, has he left me? Is he with somebody else? What about Muslim women? I mean, we didn't even touch the topic of triple talaq, which is such a burning issue, and how polygamy is almost sanctioned by their religion. So, you know, at the end of the day, our, you know, government may make one or two rules and we tom it saying, oh, the prime minister is so progressive, the Ministry of Child and Women's Welfare is doing such great work, but on ground implementation, women are being humiliated by the National Commission of Women. I have had a conversation with the chairperson where I've said that, you know, women domestic violence victims who are being guided by the police that up NCW के पास जाइए वहां पे you know complaint file कीजिए, they are being humiliated, they are being asked, did you have an affair, you know, were you spending too much of his money, do you dress a certain way, नहीं तो क्यों, your husband looks like a very sober guy, he's a government official, why would he beat you up? So everything is a woman's fault. You know, if she's unmarried, it's her fault. If she's childless, it's her fault. If her husband dies, it's her fault. You know, if she's disabled, it's her fault. If she falls in love with a woman or she can love man and woman at the same time, that's her fault. You know, so because, you know, our fate is so connected to our womb, and our womb tells us that by a certain age, बच्चे पैदा करो, घर गृहस्थी करो. That's it. काम करो, but ये भी तुम्हारा जीवन का एक, this is one, like, it's a role, it's a prophecy. So definitely, you know, developed countries like Australia, Canada, you know, there are a lot of housing benefits which are given, interest rates sometimes, you know, are, you know, the women can negotiate. Here, a entrepreneur, like, you know, I've got entrepreneurs in my community who are running huge companies, you know, they have been humiliated by bank CEOs, you know, saying that, are you sure you want to start this business, what if you get married? Like, hello, can't I be a businesswoman and you know, or a very successful corporate and a single woman? And who are our single women icons apart from a Shushmita Sen or a Tapsi Pannu or a Swara Bhaskar? I'm sure Tapsi and Swara will settle down at some point, and great for them. But I'm saying, who are our single women icons? In corporate India, I was only able to find somebody of the stature of Vinita Bali, who's the former CEO of Britannia, who's never been married like me. So, who are our single women icons? Like, you know, in the aged or the senior citizens group, you know, I was speaking to Kamla Bhasinji and I said, you're such a role model for single women. But we don't showcase them. Whenever we want to showcase a single woman, we want to show young, beautiful, drinking, smoking, about town, I can do whatever I want. But can we? Like, I would love to have this discussion for the next 1 hour, but in the next 5 minutes I have to leave, because I have to cook dinner for my father who's just lost his mother last week, and he's grieving. And every day I'm cooking dinner for him just to make him feel better. And I have to, because along with being community founder, columnist, whatever, lecturer, I'm also the only child, and I'm an emotional caregiver to my parents. I'm sure Shohini and many of us, have these kind of responsibilities, if not more. Yeah. So, I mean, we have so much to do. Like, the national draft policy itself has not gone forward in the last 4 years. It is 2020 and it's still latkoing, as they say, like a Trishanku, just stuck.
Right. Right, ma'am. That's thank you again for just highlighting so much of the vulnerability and exploitation across the board for single women. And you've talked about so many roadblocks and loopholes in access to health or legal recourse, or even in getting a government document made, right? So you briefly mentioned health policy or other things. So just, I think in conclusion, could you talk about, in your view, what would be the small steps that we could take at the local and macro policy levels uh, to approach this, and to approach this in a very structural and institutional way?
I think firstly, we have to have a census. I believe it was supposed to happen this year, but because of the COVID, it was derailed. And I think we need a more holistic sampling of the accurate figures of single women. Now, see, the figures that I have quoted throughout this talk were last shared with us in 2015, and they were made public in 2015, but the survey happened in 2011. So these figures are actually a decade old. Also, like I said, on the research level, I want to know more. Single women are not just from metro cities. What is the reality of single women from tier 2, tier 3 cities? What are their life struggles? What are they facing? For instance, at the rural grassroots level, there are organizations like the one led by my dear friend Ginny Shivastav, Ekal Nari Shakti Sangathan, which has done pioneering work in Rajasthan and northern India for largely widows, getting them Aadhaar cards, getting them work in their husbands' factories, ensuring that their land disputes are amicably settled with the thekedars, etc. But on the urban Indian front, I think we it's very fragmented. The single women's revolution, it's very fragmented. We have to first collect this data in an organized manner. What is the age group, what is the income disparities. Today we are talking about urban middle class, but what about urban poor? I mean, during the lockdown, we did a survey in the community where we saw that, so many women, almost 500 women were interviewed in the community, and they were struggling financially. Women did not have any savings. They were just living off, EMI to EMI. They didn't have a house. The father had not given the house to them because, had spent so much on their marriage that, bas ho gaya na, the dowry is like your inheritance. You get nothing after that, right? I mean, there were widows who had been cheated out of their husband's property by in-laws. So many things. The law, we only talk about rape laws, which are very, very important. But what about laws to do with single women? What about inheritance laws? What about the triple talaq bill? What about, making, today we talk about, like, okay, there's one thing about policy and there's one thing about laws. What about sensitization on the ground? What about sensitizing, everybody from university professors to bosses in offices to doctors to policemen to lawyers to just about everybody? The sensitization program has to be widespread. Just the way today we are seeing a lot of good work happening in the case of the LGBTQI spectrum. There's a lot of gender sensitization. We talk about it all the time. We have a lot of corporate sponsoring programs. The same thing has to happen. We can't be talking in this, like this kind of echo chamber just between ourselves. The reason for me to do the summit is show the world that India has, as I said, we would be one of the most populated nations of single women, more than Canada, more than Australia, more than South Africa. Show it to people. Let's talk about the problems, show them the sheer numbers, for people to wake up and smell the coffee. For, everybody from research institutes like yours to policymakers to, entertainment portals to publishers who are getting books published. Can you imagine, till I wrote Status Single, there was not a single book written on single women in the non-fiction arena. Mine was the first. Nothing. It's almost like I'm saying we are in denial because वो बिन बियाई जो आपकी बुआ है, you're not proud of her. You're always going to be a little apologetic for the fact that she's a widow or she's not married or her husband left her and ran away for a younger woman who gave him 3 sons. She's always going to stick out like a sore thumb. So what the movement and what such evenings I hope do is prove that we don't want to just stick out like a sore thumb. We want to be heard. We want the draft policy from 2016 to move forward. We want the rule to be amended for abandoned women. What is the protection? There are women who don't come out of marriages because they don't want to go to their father's house. In the US, for instance, there are shelters for battered women. Here, the shelters for battered women, a woman of my class who's slightly upper middle class, won't even want to step into a shelter like that because there's a class bias. You would expect your maids to be there, the same maids who are hit and come to work every day covering their bruises, right, with the achal or the dupatta. So what about shelters for battered women? What about foster homes for children? What about having programs which help women come back to the workforce, reboot their careers so that they can become breadwinners, so that they can afford legal care, they can buy their own homes. They don't have to become truly Atmanirbhar, which I believe is what the Prime Minister expects of this nation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar.
Yes, Kundu ma'am, I'll just like to make a few points since you are also joining from Kolkata. So many of the reforms which, earlier also, Raja Ram Mohan Roy really led the reforms for, Sati, something also very unacknowledged at that time. But since again, ma'am, you are also raising from that land only, this very much needed reform, which is not only limited to India, but to South Asia and all, it is also becoming a global phenomenon.
Global.
Right? Yes, rightly, ma'am is mentioning that it is also not just urban, but also rural. Many of the surveys we have also done there during this COVID only, so many few stories came also from Tamil Nadu that old widowed women, 60, 70 plus, and then they are getting 300, 500. In terms of policy, you rightly mentioned we have this National Social Assistance Policy program, wherein Indira Gandhi widow, we give but 300, 500, such a mere amount. Yeah. Such a mere amount, it varies from state to state. And the policy really, that the draft policy, everyone through this gender gap series, we are also looking at it. But really the point is mainstreaming single women. And most of the policies we have or the program or scheme we have, that is for poor women. So that is also, such a bottleneck. But the demands which ma'am you are making, and especially pertaining to a different diverse set of single women having the agency really, but this demand is not misleaded because it is really by the constitutional things and power we have for liberty, equality, fraternity, and also for independence, economic independence. It has really become, yes, a stigma, but the education awareness is required, and we are so thankful that you are recording in time, in history, what you have to say, representing all these women. Lastly, I really wanted to know from you, not from only a poor woman looking from policy, middle class or upper, but all sets of women. What will be the enabling factors in principles to make all this our Atmanirbhar? We also have so many hashtags to make also all women, including single women, especially to have more of their Atmavishwas and Atmasamman also embedded in this Atmanirbhar Bharat. What should be integrated in our school education, like you mentioned that also awareness like Swachh Bharat Mission. What should be and many people names also, ma'am, you mentioned what should be the approach, because what has done in have been the best practices at other parts of the world, and how to take this forward. Your, ma'am, concluding remarks. Yes.
Yeah, my concluding remarks are that I hope for, this is my dream for my sister who is now 11. When I was growing up, I remember my grandmother used to wear a beautiful, and this is going to sound like a story, but I am a storyteller, and therefore I must end with a story. That she used to wear this beautiful, ruby and diamond necklace, which is a family heirloom. And I remember I asked my grandmother once, please, can I have it? And my grandmother didn't see my 18th birthday. And I said, can I wear it on my 18th birthday? And she looked at me and she said, no, you're going to get this on your marriage. You wear this on your marriage. Your mother wore this on her marriage day. You know, I want to dream of a world for my sister where she can have whatever she wants without a deadline or a dateline for her happiness. That is my dream. I want children to be raised, especially daughters to be raised in this country, uh, and we raise them to open their bank accounts by a certain age, to, know that they have to stand on their own feet and not be told things like, oh, you're going to, get this jarao necklace on your marriage day. So the marriage day almost becomes like a personal goalpost, like mujhe to ye, it's almost like achieving 100% marks in your ICSE कि ये मुझे I have to hit bullseye, फिर मुझे ये मिलेगा. The respect, the love, the admiration of my family, the jarhao necklace, the family inheritance, or whatever it is, I'm only going to get on that day. Of course, we need sensitization in schools. Sex education is not the only thing. We need to tell our daughters that they will inherit the earth of their choice, that they're free to dream the dreams that they want to, love who they want to, or not love. That it's all right for a woman to be ambitious and successful and powerful, and not be scared of her own power. And power doesn't come only from prettiness. It just doesn't come from looking beautiful, being slim, fair, getting that IIT, IIM bridegroom, and then producing kids and being popular on social media and ticking all the boxes. Power comes from knowing I earn my own keep. Power comes from knowing I can go into a hospital and I can go for a mammogram, because that is something that as a woman every woman should do at 30. Or power comes from knowing that I can love whoever the hell I want to love, and I don't even need to get married to be with that person. So I think policy is one thing, but like I'm saying, mindset, the revolution has to be of our minds. And the revolution has to start with our minds changing. With mothers not telling their daughters that your marriage is the only thing that will ensure your happiness or your financial stability or your social security. That mothers tell their daughters, open your bank accounts, earn your own money, get out of the house, live on your own, have a lover, have 10 lovers, it's all right, it's your life, own your decisions. I think that is critical. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion. As I said, I'm very grateful to the Gender Impact Studies Center at IMPRI for involving me in this. Of course, you followed my work, which makes me also very grateful. And I feel we are seen, we are heard. Sometimes, when you're doing the kind of work that I do, which is largely in isolation and with a community just like me, you often feel that is anybody really listening? But you are, and we are, and that gives me a lot of hope. And I hope we can have more talk series on this. Shohini brought up some such important points about healthcare, about the importance of research and data collection in the field of healthcare and women. popular culture and women. I think there's so many, like I'm saying, single women in India is one of the most diverse, densely populated demographics. And I hope someday we can address, this whole spectrum and not just bring about policy change, but also a revolution of our thinking, which I think is critical in a patriarchal, conservative country like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That's really a beautiful thought to end on, and you really laid out so many things that we can hope to.
Anshula, a little bit louder.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah,
Yes,
you can.
I was saying, thank you, ma'am. It's a really beautiful note to end on, and out some things that we can hope to aspire to. And I would like to thank you again for introducing this discussion here at this IMPRI session, and also through your work where you are bringing the discussion around single women, you're popularizing it in India, and through your writing, you're also taking the plight of Indian single women at the global level. So thank you for that. And formally, once again, I thank our speaker, Srimoy Piyokundu, for taking out the time to come here today. It really warrants more discussion with the thoughts that you've brought up here today. I would like to thank our discussant, Ms. Sohini Chattopadhyay, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Arjun Kumar. Thank you. And the IMPRI team, co-organizers, GenDev, Center for Research and Innovation, and Delhi Post. And to everyone who tuned in here today, on Zoom or on Facebook Live, or is watching later on YouTube. Thank you. We hope to see you again in our future episodes of Gender Gaps. With that, have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
So much.
Thank you. Good
Have a
night.
good day.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you.